Well, half an inch of water. Well, they didn't have any water in Los Angeles, did they? So it's interesting because the last movie video I made was about this book and this guy, and this was on the 7th of January, and I think it was the next day. The fires, or it might even been the same day, the fires burst out in Los Angeles where all these events happened, the Sharon Tate murders, and now the whole lot of Hollywood, all the rich people, all their houses are burnt up, and you know, that's the way the world goes round, right? Well, not exactly, because I'm sure that there were some people who sold up. In fact, I read about some people who sold up and left, decided to hell with it. We're not going to live here anymore, it's so bad. Let's go live in some other place, somewhere with a decent political system. And so they upped and upped it. And a lot of them ended up in Florida, I believe. So the ones who were still sitting there in Los Angeles, well, the fire got them, didn't it? And it's not really surprising that something like this might happen to such a, I would say the word decrepit society. It's really what happened to the Roman Empire when it came to the end. You know, it was just filth, really. And I did go and have a look at some of the things that happened in Hollywood just before the fires, and I did notice that the Golden Globe Awards were presented. It's not the sort of thing I normally watch, but in this case I watched it, had a look at it. The Golden Globe Awards 2025. Now if you saw that Jaguar advert, this is 5 times worse than the Jaguar advert. If you want to see decadent, that's the word, decadent society, nothing good to it whatsoever, worshipping itself, worshipping each other, fame, beauty, and the main film that took the awards was a film about a gender operation that changes the sex of a person from one sex to another. This is what they thought was so great that they gave it full marks. 11 out of 10 they gave it. There'd never been more awards for a movie than this particular one. I noticed that one of the other movies was called Wicked, and there was a very wicked lady who had played one of the main parts in it. I noticed in the audience, I couldn't bear to look at her, I couldn't. She was just so terrible to look at. And so the state of Hollywood basically putting itself forward, its best face forward, the day before the fires at the Golden Globe Awards. Check it out. So these people are now homeless, right? And it's not surprising that a race of people like this might find themselves homeless, having done what they've done to the homeless people in their own town, because these people are living on huge big estates, great big expensive houses, whilst there are people sleeping in the street with no home at all. Okay. And they've created a system which is so expensive, so impossible to deal with, that anybody in their right mind, any sensitive person, any person who is not hardened to this dog-eat-dog competitive society, just falls through the cracks. Yeah? They can't put up with it. They can't do it. They can't go to these jobs. They can't apply for these thousands of jobs that they might have to apply for to even get the chance of one that they don't even want to do. So the system is broken, and God's judgment is basically on these people. Now, the last time they had the fires, I had checked out a few dates. It was 2017, and it was December, I think 2017, and Charles Manson died 2 weeks before the fire. Okay, so it was a sign, yeah, it's the same sign that I'm putting forward here, that something needs to be learnt by this society over there. Perhaps there's some cultural problem. Perhaps there's some historic background to the people who are involved in all this bad stuff that produces prostitution, grooming gangs, weird sex, yeah, funny ideas about gender, yeah. All this stuff is coming from this place. And Charles Manson was like the fire that came to Hollywood last time it got the big chop, yeah? So Charles Manson was a fire. It was a small thing, you know. Couple of people, few people died, and it was like a big warning. Don't do this stuff. Rosemary's Baby. Stop worshipping the devil, yeah? And of course he spent his whole life in prison, but he died. And the young girls, there were only girls, some of them, who actually committed the murders under his leadership, if you like. These people spent their entire lives in prison, and nobody would actually parole them. And in fact, one of them got paroled much, much later on in life, just a few years ago. I mean, she's like, I think she's nearly 80 or something. So it's interesting to check this out, but now we have the fire. So all we can do is not watch these Hollywood films, yeah? I mean, it's not possible to support this industry. And so what I'm suggesting that people do is, why don't you just buy a book instead? Here's a good book, read this book. Now, I've finished this book, and it's a really great book. It's about the CIA's involvement in mind control experiments using LSD with the hippies in Los Angeles, the same place, yeah. Check it out. It's a very, very good read. It doesn't come to any conclusions, but it also involves the CIA in the JFK assassination too, and how the same doctor who was involved in the Haight-Ashbury mind control experiments was the last person to see Jack Ruby before he went insane. And so the implication there is that he gave Jack Ruby some pills to take of some substance and shouted a few words into his brain and put him over the edge. The same thing might have happened to these women, yeah. They were all part of the same psychedelic drug, amphetamine, experimental work being done by the CIA. And that's why Charles Manson was not incarcerated long before, because he was part of an experiment, if you like, into the use of mind control. Okay, by the CIA. That's what this book is about. It's one man's life work. Read it. Now, if you want another book to look at, this is about madness, if you like, and how it affected one particular person who couldn't take it anymore. And so this is kind of like an exploration into what caused this in one person. The person murders his wife in the end during a psychotic experience. Yeah. So, two interesting books that you could purchase for less than the price of a cinema ticket, and you could examine the problem of Hollywood and what's coming out of there, rather than supporting it and therefore inviting the fruits of it to enter your lives, which is happening now in the UK. We can see the fruit of the Hollywood industry affecting all our lives now, as we have new laws passed in this country where you're not free to say anything. I don't know whether I'm free to say this. Who cares? The laws are stupid. It's necessary to scrap all the laws, start again. This is obviously what needs to happen. That's why we've got all the unemployed people, the homeless people in Hollywood at the same time, because the laws are stupid and it's not possible for people to obey these very, very stupid laws that don't add up. They just don't add up. There's no way that you can live in this society. It doesn't add up. The arithmetic just isn't there. Guy's got a lot to lose. He's a pretty nice fella. He's kinda confused. Got muscles in his head they've never been used. Thinks he owns half of this town. Starts drinking heavy, gets a big red nose. Beats his old lady with a rubber hose. And takes her out to dinner, buys her new clothes. That's the way that the world goes round. That's the way that the world goes round. You're up one day, the next you're down. It's a half an inch of water